do these folks not understand by engaging with these type of left progressive socialists that they're not actually hurting themselves more in the long run?
Well, they just, like most people tend to look short term, and most Americans are very open, generous and fair-minded people. Somebody comes to them with a story and say, look, I'm going to help your life, I'm going to make things better for you, I'm going to get you more government programs. And they'll say, yeah, that's really good, thanks very much. They don't see the hooks. They don't look long-term enough, because anybody who's going to give you something for free wants something in return.
Well, and the other side of that, too, is, one, they've been fed the lie. They had Jesse Jackson up there feeding the lie. And so the Republicans are racist. Republicans aren't for the poor. There's some of those. And then you've got those that, they're on the nipple. They've gotten caught on the nipple, and they're always going to vote on the side their bread is buttered on. Problem now is they have created an atmosphere in Chicago of absolute abject hopelessness, because they've run the jobs, they've run the businesses out, they've sucked the businesses dry. And so you got black youth at 46% unemployment in Chicago. They've got nothing to do from week to week except wait for the benefits to come in. What do they do in their free time? They get involved in gangs. They
gangbang. Now, what about like a Reverend Jeremiah Wright, this black liberation theology? Yeah. I know on your New Zeal blog, you've gone into great detail about Jeremiah Wright, who was Barack Obama's pastor for over 20 years. What is the mindset of this black liberation theology, and how much is it on the south side of Chicago?
Well, the black right since the 1920s, the communists targeted the black populations of America, because they will target anybody with a sense of grievance. And that is, and it's fair to say that blacks have had a pretty raw deal in a lot of areas in America for a long time. So it's very easy to stir them up and create a sense of grievance, a sense of hatred of white America, of capitalist America. So the black population was the number one target of the left. And liberation theology was just Marxism posing as religion, because the Marxists realized that the black population was very religious, very deeply religious. So they could only indoctrinate it with Marxism by giving it a religious cover. And that's really what liberation theology is, and that's what Jeremiah Wright is. He's a Marxist far more than he is a Christian.
Talk about a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Absolutely.
Because the black population, like you said, is very religious. That's what got them through the slavery. They would pray, and because they knew that their freedoms came from God. And this is extremely disturbing how they're being misled. And how do folks get to the truth of these issues?
Well, they have to, and not everybody is going to, because people are pretty heavily indoctrinated. It's really a matter for the people who are aware of the indoctrination, who are aware of the Marxist program in this country, to try and educate a few people at a time who are willing to listen. Now, I know there's a lot of black people in this city who are very disgusted. They can see the degradation of their communities by the socialists, by the Marxists, the welfare mentality, the handout mentality. They understand that it's destroying their communities.
It's holding them down.
It's the second plantation.
Yes.
And certainly one of the problems is the Republican Party in Illinois specifically has been really, and John Cass has written about this in the Chicago Tribune, calling the bipartisan culture of corruption. And a good group, most of the Republican Party a decade ago, decided, well, if we can't fight them, let's join them.
Absolutely, and I'm not here to wave a flag for the Republicans, because they have abdicated their responsibility in a lot of areas. But what we've got to face, and I support the Tea Party, because the Tea Party are true conservatives and true patriots. They understand the Constitution and the equality that people need to be equal before the law. And that is why I'm real pleased that a lot of Tea Party folk are reaching out to black and Latino conservatives because blacks and Latinos are naturally conservative people. They're very family orientated. They're very religious. They tend to be pro-life, and they don't like to see the degradation of their communities. But they see the Republicans as country club people who only talk to Latinos or blacks if they employ them as servants. That's the sort of the idea they have, where the Tea Party folk tend to be much more working class, real honest conservatives who can reach out to the black and Latino communities and bring them on board. And that's a very positive thing, I see.
And that's been one of the problems is the Republican Party has all but abandoned Chicago. And so we don't even, for years, we haven't even run candidates. So they haven't had the choice to vote a different way. I told Bill Brady when he was running for governor, I said, you spend your time in Chicago and you'll own this election. He laughed, and he never spent any time in Chicago.
Mr. Loudon, who specifically in the Illinois General Assembly is part of this progressive socialist agenda?
Well, I'd have to look it up, but there's obviously people like Willie Delgado, there's Barbara Flynn Curry, who's had a long time connection to the Democratic Socialists of America, people like Karen Yarborough. You know, they are heavily involved in this, and there's a whole bunch more of them. So what happens is the left goes into areas where the Democrats are strong, and it doesn't take very long to take over the local Democratic Party apparatus, especially if you control the local labour unions. So you've got whole areas of Chicago who are voting in Marxists again and again and again, thinking they're voting for Democrats.
But now, labor unions, my grandparents are all immigrants, and there was a certain protective measure that the labor unions gave to these immigrants that were ignorant to language. And what have the labor unions become? And your average union laborer is not part and parcel to this.
Absolutely. Look, a lot of union people are veterans, they're pillars of their community, they're patriotic Americans. But what they do not understand, it's like the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party of 40 years ago is nothing like the Democrat Party today. Right. And a lot of these people think they're still voting for JFK or Harry Truman. But JFK or Harry Truman would not even be allowed in today's Democrat Party. They would certainly not be allowed to run for office. They'd be viewed as far too conservative. And the same with the labour unions. The labour unions in this country were once run by people like George Meany and Lane Kirkland, who were conservative patriots. But since 1995, when John Sweeney took over as president of the AFL-CIO, now he is a Democratic Socialist of America Marxist, and he removed the anti-communist clause from the AFL-CIO's constitution, and since 1995, the communists and Marxists have flooded back. Now they control every major union in this country. SEIU, ASCME, NEA, you name it, the Marxists own it.
Let's talk a little bit about the NEA, because this is our education system that our children are being subjected to. We have the NEA here specifically in Illinois. We have the IEA, the Illinois Education Association. I would like to talk a little bit about these education unions and what are they doing to our children?
Well, I regard the education unions as the worst unions in the country, because not only are they trying to are irresponsible with other people's money, but the big deal is they don't actually care about the kids. They are there to indoctrinate the children and keep the teachers in line. Basically keep the teachers voting Democrat, keep the teachers following the agenda. The NEA and all the other education unions are totally political now, totally controlled by the left, and are pushing a Marxist agenda both onto the teachers and onto the pupils. And it's a dumbing down thing, it's a degrading thing. They want armies of mindless young kids who can hardly read or write or do arithmetic, but will follow any idea that's pushed into their head. That is the ideal recruit for the teachers' unions.
And even more than mindless, they are creating an entitlement class. They are creating a class of kids that consider themselves to be victims, and society and the government, they owe me.
Exactly.
But wait a second. There are so many good teachers. My son is in public school, and these teachers are great. And when you just talk to them one-on-one, I don't think our teachers actually know this IEA, NEA agenda either.
No.
Well, if you look at teachers tend to be very dedicated people, very altruistic people. That's why they go into the job.
Servant mindset, to make better.
But you are, and I've talked to a lot of teachers in this country, if they want to oppose the curriculum that the NEA is forcing or want to do anything different, they run up against a very big brick wall. And if they want to be blacklisted, denied jobs, denied promotions, or basically made a leper of, they will, unless they want to do that, they will not take on the union.
But Mr. Loudon, I'm just looking at, I think there's a few people that are part of this agenda. I think the majority of the teachers have, first of all, no clue that there's an agenda. They just want to serve and do a great job and love these children to make them more excellent. Don't you think there are more people that, if they were awakened to some of these truths, would give a major pushback to these unions?
Well, I think they would, but it's like in the old days of the Soviet Union. It was a few communists who ran a whole country, but if they had the power to intimidate. And if your career is on the line, if your promotion is on the line, if you want to challenge the unions and you know you're going to bring down a heap of grief on your head if you do that, you'll put your head down and do the best you can with what you've got. So people have to, teachers have to come to the reality that their unions are not acting in their own interest, and they're certainly not acting in the children's interest. So people just have to stand up against this.
And we've seen this in the private unions out there too. The private unions and the public unions, you come against a public union, the private union is going to be right there.
Yeah.
But the kind of propaganda that they feed their members, I mean, you can take a guy that's red, white, and blue, patriotic American, and he supports the union, and whatever the union says, he believes. And he never takes it to another step of actually examining it. We've also seen, we've talked to teachers, we've talked to people that, man, I would love to say something, but I don't want to get in trouble. And so there's certainly a level of intimidation, both in the private sector and the public sector. But what we came to realize is the teachers are as much pawns as the kids.
Yes.
Absolutely. They're part of the system, and if they want to buck the system, they're inviting a whole pile of grief.
Yep.
So they do the best they can within the limits imposed.